Hey y'all, Lauren Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit, and today's video is going to be all about flexible dieting and intuitive eating. And these are often pitched as very different things, and while they are very different, what I've found over the years is blending the approaches can be very helpful. And the more that I've learned, even recently, and just kind of been more introspective about it, I really do find that there can be a blend, but it has to be done correctly. So first and foremost, if you are even in the realm of like, hey, I want to be tracking macros, or hey, should I be intuitive eating, you need to have already gone through like beforehand what should be done, which really is focusing on just basic food education. Do you know portion sizes? Do you know what's in foods? Do you know what's a better choice as far as caloric density? When you eat out, are you making appropriate choices? Are you eating protein every few hours? These are things that should already be in place. So if somebody is, let's say like, hey, I want to build muscle, lose fat. Obviously the two most common things, not suggesting we do them together, but for both of those goals, let's just say those are your main priorities, right? Building muscle over time, losing fat over time, having a better body composition, and in turn having better health. You really can't just say, I'm just going to start intuitive eating if you have zero food education. And you also can't say, I'm just going to start tracking macros if you really don't know what's in food either. So first and foremost, habits need to be set up. You need to be eating, several protein-based meals, several protein meals every few hours. It's number one. You need to understand kind of caloric density, what is in something. If you're eating, fresh vegetables and fruit, or are you eating a lot of packaged goods, right? And not saying there's anything wrong with eating packaged goods, but there is obviously a huge disparity between the two as far as caloric density goes and as far as micronutrients go. So just basic food education is so vital. And you might need to be in that place first, like working on portion sizes, working on having several meals a day, getting your protein up, and just getting used to that aspect of it before we even think about this. Because if you just say, I want to intuitively eat, well, you might want to intuitively eat ice cream for breakfast, which I know I certainly would, because let's be honest, ice cream is like the best food ever. Don't fight me. It is. But if you're in that position, right? So say you've had unhealthy eating habits your entire life, you can't just start intuitively eating because you already have been intuitively eating. And I understand that the definition of intuitively eating is different than that, but I'm, just hear me out. So when you're starting out, somebody's brand new to this, so whether it's you listening or whether it's somebody that you know that you're helping, whether it's a coach or a friend, family member, food education needs to be down first. Basic things like I mentioned. Food timing, getting protein in several times a day, getting high micronutrient foods in, fruits and vegetables several times per day, and just kind of getting used to eating higher quality foods in a reasonable portion. So really key. So once you've done all that, you've graduated from that period, hey, what should I do? I do think that macros are very valid for a lot of people. Is it a valid tool to use forever? No, I don't think that everybody should track macros for the rest of their life. That would be hard and unnecessary. I don't necessarily think that many people need to do that. Now, there's different ways of tracking macros too, right? So there's ways of, I am tracking every single thing to the gram. Like a gram of rice falls off, it's going back in. Or, I needed 100 grams, that's 102, we're taking it out. And let's say you have carb targets for the day, 150 carbs, and you had 152 one day and you're like, oh no, should I have 148 the next day? So there's very precise tracking, which I think is only really valid the very end of a contest prep. Not saying any of my clients are saying just don't be precise, but there's a difference. I think everybody knows when you've been in it for a while, if there's like, hey, this is, I'm just kind of moving along with my day. And you can even track your food. I know this is like crazy to a lot of people, and I'll say why I think it affects me this way a little bit less. A lot of people will try, and basically what happens is if they don't hit the numbers exactly, they like freak out, right? And they think if they don't weigh everything to the T, they don't know what they're doing. Honestly, after a while, if you have gone through maybe some stricter periods of tracking, you will be able to say, okay, well, that's going to be about this, about that, and you fit it in. There's going to be natural fluctuations that way. But let's say it's 5 or 10 grams, maybe even 15. If you do that every week, and there are fluctuations, it's not always like the higher end, you're going to be okay, right? Again, if you're doing a contest prep, in my opinion, still, it's going to be best to be as precise as possible. But I find that I've always like kind of been able to do that like over time when people like, I can't track every day, and I don't track every day. So I'm not trying to sit here and like, like I'm this high pedestal person. I track my macros every day. I definitely don't. But the people who do track more frequently and for longer periods of time typically will, okay, yeah, I know this is about this much for the macros, plug it in, good to go. I think the reason that I obsess less over the like tiny little fluctuations that in that way is I hand track, and I know this is going to sound really weird to a lot of people, but I do not use a tracking app, so I don't have this like consistent countdown, like, okay, 37 carbs, 24.5 protein, 6.5 fat, what's that going to be? Like, yes, when I am writing it down on paper, I'm still doing the same thing, but it's a lot less obsessive than like the phone, I think. And I don't know if that's a good thing, bad thing, but I've found that worked a lot better for me. And that also got me in the habit of eating a lot of the same consistent meals, which makes it a lot easier mentally as well. So it's kind of like a win-win in that situation. And not saying that everybody needs to like stop tracking on their apps as well. But just know that you can hit your macros and you can be pretty close. But if it says 98 grams or 102 grams when you weigh out the rice, it's going to be okay both ways, right? So that's just like one thing. So let's just say, okay, that's tracking macros, right? So the benefit is it's the most precise. Obviously, you know exactly what you're eating, and you know exactly where to make changes. It's not like, oh, just pull out these foods and we'll see what happens. Nope, you know exactly, hey, drop in these carbs, drop in this, whatever. And so that is the best, of course, for body composition, particularly for leaning out and also for gaining muscle, just so that you are consistent. Our bodies really love consistency, and I do find that when people eat very similar amounts of food for long periods of time, they typically look better. I have no science on this besides anecdote, watching clients, and even myself. There's periods where I'm eating consistently kind of the same meals, the same amount, and I just simply look and feel better versus if you're just kind of like up and down more erratically. So that is where I think tracking does really shine. But I think what happens, this is kind of the bad side of tracking, is that it does become so black and white and rigid that it is no longer flexible, right? So flexible dieting to me does not suggest if it fits your macros, eat junk food. Flexible means really the mindset behind it. So if you look at a plate of food, like I can literally go anywhere and say, okay, well, I'm eating this and it's going to have roughly these many macros. And it's because I've had the food education first. I've rigidly tracked for many years. And also I'm making good choices. I'm not going, oh, well, I think this pancake that's probably 2,000 calories, which pancakes can definitely be 2,000 calories, guys. Don't think that I'm like lying about that. Now restaurants are putting calories everywhere. So you're like, ooh, I'm not going to order that. So let's just like, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's probably 30 carbs. No, that's a ton. So there, you have to be smart with what I'm saying, like be a little bit more loose with your tracking. It's not necessarily that they're being looser with your tracking. You're just like, even if it's not something that you've made and weighed out precisely, you can still hit close to your targets is what I'm saying. But to that, you have to have that food education first, because a pancake is going to have not only a ton of carbs, but a ton of fat. They put so much fat in pancakes, like at a restaurant, right? Especially the huge, big, fluffy ones. Like there's globs of fat in there, you guys. That's why it tastes so good. And then, of course, the topping. So this is just one example. I'm not like trying to shit on pancakes because I love me some pancakes. But literally, we were out. I just thought of that because the other day we were out. One of my clients competed last weekend, and we went and met her for breakfast. And so I was like, okay, I kind of like want to have a big breakfast because I hadn't really eaten much the day before. And anyways, we were at this fancy place that I loved. And I was going to get a pancake. I was all pumped. And then I was like, holy shit. Now, I totally don't trust exact calories or anything like that from restaurants. Another pro tip. If you're trying to track something, I usually just say, estimate it, like make good choices. And then let's say it's like a dessert or a pancake. Just kind of estimate, hey, this many carbs, this many fat, overestimate it. But just for reference, like the one that I was looking at getting was like 1,600 calories just for the pancake. And I was like, oh my God, I know I'll eat it all. Like there's literally no doubt in my mind that I'm going to eat all that. So probably not a good choice to make. So stuff like that. Don't be like, oh yeah, that's totally like the protein pancakes I make at home. No, you have to be smart about it. But if you get an omelet with maybe some potatoes on the side and you have, a quarter of a pancake. You can estimate that and still hit your numbers, is what I'm saying. So that is kind of the flexible side of flexible dieting. Not necessarily choosing the bad foods to hit perfectly and scan them on your tracker or whatever. No, I don't care if you can scan an Oreo into your macros. Can you actually go into a situation with food that's not your own and not eat all of it? Not order 16 pancakes. I'm going to have a quarter of this. I'm going to share it with somebody and good to go. That is true flexibility. And that's kind of where the intuitive aspect comes to it. So somebody has the food education, they've already been going through this for a while. Now they've been going through periods of maybe rigidly tracking macros, and they've been going through periods of more flexibly tracking their macros while still kind of hitting these targets. Then the next step is, okay, so should we intuitively eat just all the time? Should we transition to that forever? And it really just depends on the person's goals. Depends on the person's mental state, depends on their goals. And those are really the two things that I can think of, right off the bat. So if somebody has high competitive goals and they are competing soon, again, not really the best idea. But I do think that we can kind of go through these periods of so let's say, let's just set up like a diet scenario, which is either contest prep or even just a regular diet. Before somebody diets, you kind of want to rein things in a little bit, because if you impose a calorie deficit right away when somebody's been very, very loose, it can be an extra hard step. So what I like saying is almost like this pre-diet where it's a few weeks. If somebody has been a little more flexible, hey, we're just going to rein it in a little bit, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So that's going to be a little bit more structured, still having some untracked stuff, which I'll get to as far as the intuitive side. Just a little bit more structure. Then in the diet phase, it's going to be a lot more structured, right? Typically, I don't love people having untracked meals or things like that when they are in a diet. If they are in a lifestyle diet, way different story. If they are in a contest prep, at this point with my coaching, I am not comfortable with people doing that. I just don't find that it's obviously as accurate. And then it's really just can get out of hand really, really fast, especially when people are lean. So if somebody's, months out and they're like, hey, it's my birthday. Okay. Hit these numbers earlier, go enjoy your birthday, not a big deal. But as the diet kind of wanes on and these physiological changes happen, I just find that people really just can't handle it as well. So, you're going through this diet, you're going to probably get a little bit more rigid, as the diet goes on, normal with a calorie, kind of restriction. And then right out of the gate from a diet, it's really, really hard from a physiological perspective, because your body is screaming at you to eat everything from all angles, right? Your gut is empty, your fat cells are empty, your hormones are whack. It's give me all the food stat, and whatever goal that you've just hit, whether it's a competition or just a goal that you've set for yourself, whether it's weight loss or an event or whatever it might be, now that's over, carrot dangling from the stick, gone. What's going to happen? All hell breaks loose for a lot of people. And of course, this does also play into your relationship with food. If you have a good relationship with food, it's a lot easier. But it is hard to maintain that awesome relationship with food as you diet super, super lean. And it can get better over time, and it's not to say that it can't. It can if you work a lot on it. But in general, things are going to get a lot more strained the leaner you are. So basically, all of this to say, come out of a dieting phase, you're probably not in the best headspace to make all these great choices for yourself, whether it's an untracked meal or just a lot of flexibility. So the initial kind of weeks post diet, it's a lot more helpful to have some more structure, but to really bump those calories up initially. So you actually do, hit them, feel a little bit better. And then from there, I really like to kind of introduce a little more flexibility as far as untracked meal. Typically I do that 1 to 2 times a week for clients. And then for other clients, we kind of transition even more to a more intuitive approach. I have some clients who we hit macros during the week. They're very structured with their meals, and then weekends, they just eat. And it's not always a perfect system right away, but you can't always have the reins on forever, right? So it is a learning experience. And then other people, I say, hey, you're going on a trip, just enjoy yourself, right? This is not, hey, you've dieted for 9 months and it's a week post-show, go enjoy yourself. A little bit of a different story. This is when somebody's a little bit more normalized. We kind of do that, right? Because trust me, I've done that too. And anything you try to do post-diet, you try to tell yourself oh no, I got this. You don't got shit, okay? I'm telling you, you don't have it. It is so, so hard. And this kind of goes into a different topic, but I've been finding that the ultimate peak for a competition, right? This does not apply to a lifestyle diet because it's not like you're peaking on stage. But so say you've reached the ultimate leanness you need. Ideally, we're going to do that before the show so that we can reverse into the show. And we've always, a lot of coaches talk about that. Oh, just reverse diet into the show. You'll look better, this and that. And that's really what it is touted for. And you will look better. Inflammation's down, less water retention. You just look fuller and harder. It's great. Training is better. But what I'm also finding is when I do that with people, mentally, they're in such a better place that they're like, oh, I'm kind of regaining my normal hunger signals. I still, they're still lean, so they don't feel like bomb, but it's a lot better. So I'm honestly thinking that is going to be more of my goal as I shift, towards this for clients. Not even making it like the exception, but almost trying to make it a rule. And I get that there are deadlines for competitions. But if people are doing this in the right way, and really looking at their career as like a long-term thing, they're not going to rush the shows. And that's something that I really try and instill with Team LocoFit clients and our Team LocoFit coaches is that, yes, we want to get on stage. Yes, we want to win. Yes, we want pro cards. But ultimately, your life is a lot more important. And I'm learning that the longer that I've been in this, and I've had to go through, a lot of these situations myself. I wouldn't even say unfortunately, because now I can learn. I've learned from them. I learned from them and I can pass them on to, coaches, clients, and also you guys. So it wasn't in vain. But looking at the long-term goals and looking at your long-term career is far more important than that immediate, win that you think is the most important thing right now. And you have to have those goals to excite you. You can't just say oh, I'll just get on stage whenever, or I'm just doing this because I have no inclination to be competitive. No, we do want to be competitive, but there's a difference of being competitive and doing it the right way versus just compete. And then you're just honestly not going to be competitive unless you're a super genetic freak. But even those people I just see over time, it just doesn't look as good. So reeling into that ramble back in, because I do think I want to make a whole video on that because it's a topic I've been thinking about a lot, is just, maybe ideally getting people in this place before they even end their diet, specifically for competitors, where we've kind of reversed. So you still have this goal. And this could also work for a lifestyle client with a very clear-cut goal, not just a weight loss goal, like a clear-cut date. Reversing into it for even a few weeks. So now we're getting food back up. You still have the goal to keep you, kind of in line, but now you're feeling a lot better. That's going to be more of my push to do that with more people moving forward. But back to now we're past that. Now we've added in some more intuitive stuff. Maybe it's meals per week. Maybe it's whole days. Is there ever a place where I think that people should transition fully to an intuitive eating aspect? And I do think that there can be. I do think that a lot of people are not even really there yet, but I do think that for the clients that are there, that, I need to reevaluate how I look at that, right? Okay, because before it'd be there's so many variables, I can't really track stuff, but we can still track a lot of things, and being able to identify with those certain cues is really helpful. And maybe it's not fully intuitive. Maybe it's hey, we're just gonna, we're gonna track protein and we're gonna make sure we get a certain amount of veggies and protein in. So it's almost like we've reverted back to the beginning with the food education, hey, we're only gonna focus on this stuff. But you have a much greater understanding now that you've gone through these periods. And I do think that it is viable. I think that intuitive eating can fail in a few ways. So here's why I think it shouldn't be for everybody. One, definitely not for people who have no food experience, whether it's tracking macros or just food education in general. I don't think that it's a good idea. Because, again, if I were to just intuitively eat, I would intuitively eat ice cream for every meal. If we're just really being honest. I know you guys are probably thinking I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. So there has to be, I'm kind of kidding. You guys are very concerned. You're does Lauren only eat ice cream? I'm not sure. She hasn't really posted a lot of food pictures lately. You know what I'm saying? I do think that there is, if you've been eating in an unhealthy way, you can't just say, I'm going to intuitively eat. No, there has to be food education there. And I do think that tracking for some period of time, for some type of rigidity, can be helpful. Now, I also don't think that it's a good idea to transition immediately to an intuitive eating type model after you've come off of a very restrictive diet. And there will be people who might disagree, but I've done that, and I wouldn't really call it intuitive eating. I would call it trying to keep my shit together and then not tracking and eating whatever I wanted. It doesn't go very well. So if you can intuitively eat and hit a moderate calorie threshold, have at it. I can't. After a diet, it's just game over. Like, there's literally, I have zero willpower left. I have zero restraint left. My body fat stores are tapped out, and my hormones are like, we gotta eat. So for me, it's not a good plan. And for a lot of the people that I've coached, it's not good. I've seen people with unbridled, just, here, eat whatever you want. It doesn't go well. Maybe for a day or two after the show, and then you gotta kind of reel it back in. So I don't think it's appropriate immediately after a diet. And then I don't think it's also a good idea if people are already kind of in this negative headspace. So I think that this is kind of where the balance comes in, where I think it's helpful to track some aspects and then not track other aspects. So for some clients that are very emotionally tied, not even necessarily with food, but just in general, like they are maybe more emotional or maybe more in their heads with things, and they equate eating or not eating certain things to their self-worth, to their life, like these huge outcomes that aren't really necessarily true. So when somebody's in that position and they're like, well, I just want to eat, I just want to intuitively eat, I just want to eat whatever. That's where I can kind of think that it can kind of snowball, because then what ends up happening is, okay, well, some days you'll be like, oh, well, I feel good about this. And then maybe an overeating slip happens, and then it's like, oh shit, what do I do? And then it might spiral out of control. So again, this does come down to the person's relationship with food ultimately. So if somebody has a negative relationship with food because they view food as an extension of themselves and their self-worth and how much they can do as a person, that's where I kind of think that it's not helpful. Likewise, macro tracking has its dark side as well. Same idea, right? Somebody can become so neurotic with the macro tracking that it becomes this like weird, rigid robot. So you kind of have to balance out the rigid robot with the unbridled hungry hippo of wanting to eat everything, and just the mentally like downtrodden place that you might be with food. So best case scenario, in my opinion, is you kind of go through these periods where, kind of reel stuff in pre-diet. Diet is, flexible, but, on track, gets a little bit more rigid as calories go down. Just a natural byproduct, makes things easier, makes progress easier. Afterwards, still keeping it tight, but more overall calories, more fuel, so that you are feeling competent and actually hitting everything. And then afterwards, start adding in some more intuitive aspects, whether it's an untracked meal or 2 untracked meals or an untracked whole day, intuitive weekends or a trip or whatever it might be. And then eventually, if you do want to transition to a full intuitive place, doing so when you are in the right headspace mentally. And I have seen clients do this very, very successfully, but you have to be in the right place to do this. So I know that was kind of a long video, and I really hope that it was clear. I know that I'm not always the most concise, which is something that I try to work on, but I really wanted to kind of dive into that, not just say, oh, this is so layered. Like, I wanted to give you guys all the nuances, and I'll probably finish recording this and think of even more. But I do think that this is such a multi-layered question, and there's so many responses that will honestly work for this. So short answer is you can do both, and I think some combination of both is optimal for people who have the proper food education. Regardless of your goal, I think that blending some aspects of some things that are tracked, some things that are intuitive, and tracked, again, doesn't necessarily mean putting it into an app. It means, hey, I know I have at least 3 meals today that I've prepped that have a certain amount of protein in them. I'm getting this amount of veggies, that kind of stuff. So people can call it whatever you want. That's how I'm labeling it, which doesn't really mean anything, but for the purposes of this video, that's what I'm getting at. So let me know what you guys thought about that. If you liked it, if you were like, holy shit, what is Lauren talking about today? And I'd love to answer, whether people have additional comments or questions about it. Wanted to let you guys know that I will be in Singapore with an amazing group of individuals. Myself, Eric Helms, Alberto Nunez, Cliff Wilson, and Ryan Doris will all be speaking in Singapore September 21st and 22nd. So essentially, we are going to take you through a whole holistic approach to competing. So pretty much like, what is bodybuilding? Where should you start? Like pre-prep, all the way through prep to peaking, and then just kind of the mental aspect of all of it, kind of wrapping it up. So there will be a full day of of talks. Why did I say the same word twice? There will be a full day of talks from all the presenters, And then the second day will be a hands-on workshop in the gym type setting with everybody as well. So super excited. So if you are in Asia or Australia, because both those places are pretty close, we would love to see you there. So I will put the link to the tickets below. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Let me know. Yeah, we'd love to see you. It's going to be an amazing group of people. I'm thrilled. So yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have not already, please subscribe to our newsletter. I know that you'll love it. That's why I want you to subscribe to it. Every week you get 2 workouts. So Metcon Monday gets in your inbox Sunday night, which is a free Metcon for you guys. And then on Wednesdays, we have an educational article from one of the 5 coaches. And you can go to teamlocofit.com. Go to the top, it says subscribe. You can just hit that, put your email in, good to go. And for all other information on the programs that we offer and applying for coaching, you can find it on there as well.